Cool. Alrighty. Hey, everyone. I had some spontaneous free time, so why not live stream, right? And again, you guys all mentioned that this was the time that I cannot pin the message. I don't know what the heck is going on here. That's weird. Huh. Whoever thought I'd see the day when a YouTuber wouldn't be able to pin his own messages? Anyway, you saw the title of the video. For those of you that are watching this later, I was given a request by Hey Girl. I forgot what the other numbers were next to her username. She asked me if I would share some of my spiritual experiences on my next live stream. And considering that I usually have to be the one to ask people, hey, is it okay if I talk about my mission trips and my conferences and all these great things I've been on? It is really refreshing when someone else asks me for a change. So I think the biggest spiritual encounter I've had was when I was miraculously healed. This was in 2018, and it was on the most recent mission trip that I went on. We had Eucharistic adoration, and it was on a Tuesday. And actually, I just realized if Hey Girl doesn't, well, no, she can always watch the replay. Well, I can always repeat the stories whenever she shows up. But anyway, this was on a Tuesday night. It was Eucharistic adoration. And prior to that, I had a really sore back. In fact, I had a sore back and sore shoulders ever since I was a teenager. And, I wasn't exactly a teenager when I returned to that mission trip. And so I had really struggled with lifting stuff on that trip because the leader of our group had asked me to carry these drinks to our table because every parish was given a table where we could put our snacks. And I was having so much trouble lifting that container full of drinks. But then this tiny little, I think she was like a sophomore in high school, came up to me and she said, "Hey, it looks like you're struggling with carrying that. Would you like some help?" And I said, "Yes, please." And she just effortlessly lifted it up, and I'm just kind of trailing along behind her. And I said, "Oh, thank you so much. I have such a sore back that I can barely lift anything." Well, 2 days later, when we had Eucharistic adoration, the priest began by telling the story of the woman with hemorrhages in the Gospels and how she touched Jesus's clothes, and that was enough to heal her of something she'd been afflicted with for 12 years. So the priest put the blessed host in the monstrance, which for those of you that aren't Catholic, it's like this, it looks like a giant trophy, and it has like this tiny little circular glass window where you can see the host inside of it. And then he put these two pieces of cloth underneath the monstrance. And so he told us that story. And then he said, if you guys believe that that is actually Jesus, then you would also believe that these pieces of cloth are Jesus's clothes. So if you want to receive healing, then come and touch these clothes and ask for Jesus to heal you. So I wasn't exactly thinking too hard at this moment about my back and shoulders. In fact, I'm pretty sure I had other problems on my mind. So when it was my turn to approach it, I took the cloth in my hands and I said, in my head, of course, I said, "Lord, I'm having a real hard time with my current girlfriend. So if you could either get us back together or if you could help me be better at recognizing people's faces, that'd be great." So I kissed the cloth and I went back to where I was kneeling before. And maybe like 3 seconds later, this feeling that I've never experienced this before. It was like someone was pouring hot water down my back, but it passed in the shape of like a T. And then like the water felt like it was evaporating, and then it just turned into this warm heating pad sensation. And the next thing I knew, I could rotate my arm, I could go all the way up, I could rotate it, and I was able to lift stuff after that. Hello, Array and Jungle Running. Glad you guys could make it. You can thank Hey Girl for the subject of today's video, because she says share some of your spiritual experiences. So I was talking about when I got my miraculous healing at adoration. Hope you guys were able to hear it on time. But to answer your question, Array, my thoughts on Islam are I don't have too much knowledge of them. I just think it's unfortunate that the hijab that women wear is technically optional, but that's not what they'll make you think. They'll make you think that it's mandatory. And there's usually this stereotype that Islamic men are super forceful and controlling of their women. So if there's something in the Quran that's saying that, then I can't get behind that, because I'm all about gender equality. I don't think men should lord over women. I don't think women should lord over men. I think men and women should be equals, and they should work together in a marriage, not have one dominating over the other. But yeah, how are you guys doing? Um, I would ask you, hey, what spiritual experience would you like me to talk about? But you guys don't really know too much of them. But if you want to talk about something other than spiritual experiences, go for it. Just know that if Hey Girl shows up, I am going to rapidly change the subject, because it was her idea. But yeah, so prior to that miraculous healing, I was only able to lift my arm maybe like this high without hurting it. And there was this bulging like muscle right here. And now it's like flat skin. And that was gone after that day. And then I started standing up straighter. And I went into the kitchen after that, and I lifted up 7 kitchen trays, whereas before I might have been able to lift up like 2. And then the priest, when he heard that I was miraculously healed, he said, Paul, I was wondering if your healing could be part of my homily on Thursday morning. And I said, oh, heck yeah, I'd love to. So then, when Thursday morning came, I told people about my healing, and I said, I'm going to prove that I was miraculously healed to you guys. I'm going to do push-ups. And prior to that, I could barely do like 2 or 3. And I did 10. And there's a video of it on YouTube, because there was someone in the audience who filmed the whole thing. And so I now have a way of sharing my testimony and a way of sharing me doing the push-ups, and you can hear people cheering. And it was so great that God, he didn't even answer what I originally asked for. He said, I didn't even ask for healing on my back and shoulders. The irony is that the things that I did ask for, not only did they not come true, but they almost kind of got worse by the end of the trip. Because I don't know if you guys heard this earlier. I guess if you watch the replay, you'll hear it. I had asked that God would get me back together with my girlfriend at the time, when in actuality, I broke up with her the very next day. Or I should say the day after I got back from the trip. As far as face blindness, I'm still struggling with that. There were these 2 girls on that trip named Emma and Jordan. In retrospect, I feel so stupid that I kept mixing them up, because one of them had blonde hair and it was wavy, and the other had straight brown hair, kind of like mine, but much longer. And they kept saying that, like, Jordan's the one with the blonde hair, I'm the one with the brown hair. But they were like super patient with me, and they never said I was stupid like some other girls did on prior mission trips. So I was very, very happy that even though it was a real struggle trying to get the 2 of them, trying to figure the 2 of them out, I eventually asked if they both wanted pictures, and they both said yes. And I made sure to label those pictures so that I'd never forget them going forward. I hope chat didn't just die on me, because either that or YouTube is weird. Because, like, while it said 0 people were watching, it said that I got a like. So I'm starting to think that YouTube is on the fritz with just about everything. Like, I think it's on the fritz with analytics as well, because there was one time where it said I had a 0% female audience, even though I knew for a fact that my editor at the time, who was female, was watching my videos. So it should have at least said 1%. So you can't always trust analytics at face value. But yeah, that was probably the biggest spiritual encounter that I had. I've also had a time when I was really sick and I was at Mass and I was really, really desperate to receive Holy Communion. I think at one point I had even run out of my pew and like thrown up in the bathroom. But I was so desperate that I went up to communion anyway. And when the priest put the host on my tongue, I coughed it out. And I said, "Can I please have another one? I'm sorry about that." And he said, "Yes." And then as soon as I finished consuming that second host, I was healed and I wasn't sick anymore. There was another time that I went to church and I had really bad lactose intolerance for the past, I think it was a couple of months at that point. And that particular Sunday, I don't know what was different about that particular Sunday, but after I had Holy Communion, I felt like I could eat dairy products again without taking my dairy pills, and I haven't taken them since that day. I've also had encounters where I felt like God directly spoke to me. There was one time when I was going through really bad depression, and I ended up being hospitalized for it, that it was so bad. Thankfully, I was only in the hospital for 6 hours, which, according to what I've been told by most people, is almost nothing. Because I think they realized that I still had some glimmer of hope left in me. Because I kept saying, well, there's this conference I got to go to, and this conference is like my last hope. And if this conference ends up being a failure, then I will end my life. So when I got to the conference, I went to confession and I actually surprised the priest because he was really shocked at what I had to say. I think it was just because he wasn't used to someone being in that much depression and the particular things that I was depressed about. So then he gave me my penance and I went to the adoration chapel. And I still can't figure out how to pin this message. But anyway, so I went to the adoration chapel and I was the only person in the room. And then I heard this voice. It was like coming from this side of me that said, by the time this conference ends, go and talk to a group of 2 or more people. And I looked behind me. There was no one there. No one else was in the room besides me. And I said, you got to be kidding me. I am terrible at talking with groups of people. I'm honestly surprised I do these live streams with how bad I am at talking to people. But the voice persisted. He said, no, by the end of this conference, go and talk to 2 or more people. So I think it was either late Saturday or early Sunday. I was walking along I'd like to say it was the 4th floor, because the 5th floor was where all the speaker rooms were. And as I was passing a spot where eventually when I came back to that conference the year after, they put a bench in the exact spot where these girls were sitting. And I like called out to everyone nearby and said, guess what? They put a monument here for where I got out of depression. And I found a group of, I think it was like 5 or 6 girls sitting against the wall. And at first I just politely said hi and then kept walking. I walked maybe like 6 steps and I put my hand on the railing next to me. And I said, that's a group of more than 2 people. Oh, are you kidding me? I got to go and talk to these people. So I went back and I sat down across from them. And I said, I feel like the Lord was asking me to talk to you guys, but I have no clue what I'm supposed to actually say. So what I ended up doing was I told them how deep in depression I was. And I said, I still wanted to come to this conference anyway, because I wanted to make a difference in people's lives. And so, if nothing else, I just hope that me being here can help you guys get closer to God and can make a difference. So by the time we finished talking, the girls all said, hey, you did make a real difference. And I carried a notebook around back then because I liked getting autographs of whoever I met. So they all autographed it and they all said, like, you made a difference. But not only that, but for the rest of the conference, I kept getting people coming up to me and saying, hey, Paul, I saw that you talked to my friends. And my friends were saying that you really made a difference in our lives. And so that got me thinking, well, that's what my friends back home are saying. But obviously, they're not corresponding with each other. They don't know each other. So if my friends are saying the same things as these people over here, and they didn't coordinate it or try to trick me, maybe, just maybe, it must be true. A month later, I got out of depression, and it has been 10 blissful years since that day when I got out of depression. The problem was the reason why it didn't take place right away, and it took a month after that conference, was because the final keynote speaker was this really outspoken, like, obviously he was Catholic, but he came across as this really outspoken Baptist. And he kept saying, I'm not going to repeat how he said it because I don't want to hurt my voice if I'm streaming. But he was like, we are failures as Catholics, and there are still a lot of people that are suffering out there. We are not doing a good job. And when you're in depression, that is the last thing you want to hear, is that you're a failure. So I had to talk myself out of everything he was saying. But one thing good that did come out of that is that, so the way that these conferences worked is that they had what's called a pinning ceremony, where the archbishop blessed the pins, and they had like the logo of the year of that conference. And as we were exiting the conference room, the leaders of the conference would pass a pin to each person and ask the question, do you promise to blank? And it would be different depending on what the conference was. And this particular conference, the question was, do you promise to take or to spread the Lord to all nations? Now, I didn't want to just say yes and go on with my day. I really wanted to feel like I meant it and that I literally would take God to all nations. So I thought to myself, well, how can I do that? I'm not much of a missionary type of guy and I don't like travel. So what could I possibly do to take God to all nations? And then it hit me, YouTube. And as soon as I got home, I looked on my computer and I discovered Windows Movie Maker, and I started making YouTube a regular part of my weeks. And ever since that day, I have, for the most part, been consistently uploading. So that conference not only was the conference that got me out of depression, but it was also essentially the birth of the modern Catholic gaming nerd formula. Because don't get me wrong, my old videos have aged terribly. But one thing that hasn't aged terribly is my manner of speaking. It's pretty much identical to how it was back in 2016. And so for the past 10 years now, I've been applying that principle that I had from that conference and giving it to you guys. All right, let me just make sure that everything's going okay, because I don't know. YouTube is so weird lately with live streaming. What does my Wi-Fi say? Maybe that's the problem. Okay, great, but not terrible either. Let's see what we're. I've definitely had some conferences where I felt like God was calling me to something greater. Like when I went to the Steubenville Youth Conference after Eucharistic adoration, I felt this strong urge to start like taking my faith more seriously. So after adoration happened, we had like what I call the Catholic altar call, where like the keynote speaker said, anyone who really wants to promote Christ should come to the front and profess that you're gonna talk about him more. So I reached out my arm as far as I could reach it toward this gigantic crucifix on the back wall. And I said, Lord, from this moment forward, I promise that I am going to start spreading the word to as many people as possible. Still hadn't reached YouTube status yet. It was more so at this point, I was thinking more of like my Facebook friends. And I was like, I was in a bit of a bad place back then. So I was kind of like crying both happy and sad tears at the same time. And this boy, I think he had like red hair and glasses. He just came out of the crowd. It seemed like he literally parted the crowd just to reach me. And he gave me a hug. And then he disappeared. And it was just such perfect timing that to this day, it makes me wonder if that boy was actually an angel. Because again, he seemed to go straight towards me. And there was like, I think 3,000 people at that conference. So it would have been very, very hard to actually see each other. And again, he didn't say anything. He just gave me a hug. And then, as far as I was aware, he just vanished into the crowd. So if he wasn't an angel, I'm definitely hoping that the God allows him to be in heaven, assuming he isn't already. Because I would love to just go up to that boy and say, I still remember that hug that you gave me all these years later, because it was during one of the most profound spiritual experiences of my life. I had also been on a retreat where the opening speech of that retreat was told in almost complete darkness. The only illumination were a bunch of candles that we were all holding. And one of the teen leaders at that retreat was reading a reflection from Mother Teresa, now Saint Mother Teresa. And it was the I thirst for you prayer, where she talked about how when Jesus said, I am thirsty on the cross, he wasn't referring to literal thirst, or he could have been, because I've heard that crucifixion is basically like starvation. He was referring to how he was desperate for us as people, that he wanted to spend eternity with us in heaven. And he wanted a personal relationship with us. And that was a really big deal to me, because I knew that God loved me, and I knew that he died on the cross for me, but I never knew it was personal. I guess like I saw it as more of like a universal gesture as opposed to an individual one. Like when Jesus died on the cross, he died for everyone. Like, yes, that's cool. But to hear that Jesus was desperate for me as an individual, that he loved me, Paul, sins and all, and he would have died for me if I was the only person in the world. And at that point, I just said, wow, I think I love Jesus more than ever. And that was, I'm trying to think, how old was I when that happened? I think I was about 16 or 17 when that happened. And I ended up loving the rest of that retreat. I didn't end up loving that youth group because they did treat me pretty badly. Not all of them, though. There were quite a lot of people that really liked me in that youth group. But the people that didn't like me really didn't like me. And that's what got me into depression in the first place, or at least I'm fairly certain that it did. So, oh, good. Thank you, Jungle Running. I was so worried that something had happened to the chat. Because even when you said that, YouTube still said 0 people were here. So I have no idea what the heck is going on. But nice to know that chat wasn't busted. Did you hear any of that? If not, you'll probably have to watch the replay, because I just blabbed a whole bunch of stories. But now that I'm done blabbing, I was curious if there was anything that you wanted to say, like any big news, any amazing revelations, new games coming out. Did you see? I forget whether you like video games or not, but did you see the new announcement for Danganronpa 2x2? Oh, if Time Jester Jevil is in the audience, he's going to be so happy to hear that. For those of you watching the replay, assuming Jevil doesn't show up, they announced that every single English actor from the original Goodbye Despair would be reprising their roles. Every single one of them. Now, in Japanese, they almost did that, except that the voice actors for Monokuma and Manami have passed away since then. But every actor who is still alive in Japanese was able to return. But in English, all of them are still alive. Haven't played Danganronpa? It is not for the faint of heart. And it is also a very extreme game, nearly every kind of objectionable content possible. But from a Catholic perspective, what I really, really love about Danganronpa is it's insufferably optimistic, or at least it tries to be. And there's a Bible verse that says that the three greatest things are love, hope, and faith. And the Bible talks about the value of hope and why we always have to hope that there's going to be something better in life. And Danganronpa is the kind of game that usually has a very depressing story. Like the whole premise is that there are 16 high schoolers who are trapped in a school, and they're told that the only way they're able to leave is if they successfully kill one another and the others don't discover who the murderer is. But there's this overtone of we have hope that we can overcome these impossible odds and we're going to change the world once we get out of the school. And as a Catholic, I feel like it's so easy for us to get caught up in this idea that, with all these wars and all these political divides and all this stuff, that we're always at odds with each other. And we don't know the answers to how things are going to turn out. Sure, we know that Jesus is going to come again, but we don't know when. And we don't know how Jesus is going to fix everything, but we just got to hope that whatever happens will be the best case scenario. And Danganronpa was the kind of game that, yes, it has like so much objectionable stuff that I would not recommend it unless you have a really strong stomach. But after I played Danganronpa, when my family was going through our terrible situation that happened back in 2024, Good Friday of 2024 to be exact, I remember thinking about Danganronpa. That was one of the first things that popped into my head. Now, I didn't quote that to her, but when my sister-in-law was crying about what was going on, I just said, it is not possible for me to feel any emotion apart from hope, because we know that God loves us so much. And even if temporarily we're having a hard time, if we have faith, and if we keep believing that God's going to get us out of this, then we can have hope for best case scenario to happen. And I don't think I would have had that optimistic mindset if I hadn't played Danganronpa. There you go. There's my unofficial Catholic review of the entire series. Now, I would probably say that underlying message would probably take a lot of digging to discover, because there's so much other objectionable stuff in that game that I think most people probably wouldn't have come to that conclusion. But at the same time, I think even an atheist could really get a lot out of Danganronpa, because hope is a really good virtue to have. It's this expectation that no matter how bad things look, there's no guarantee that things are going to stay terrible forever. And as Christians, I feel like we have even more hope than that. Like, we have hope for heaven. We have hope for intercession. We have hope that there could be someone who comes along that changes the world. There's a lot to be excited about in life. And that's something that I think about a lot, is if I live a long life, is it going to be torturous to just be on this earth for so long and wait so long to go to heaven? And playing Danganronpa has helped me to realize that even if I can't see the outcome, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So there you go. But what games have you played, Jungle Runnin'? Sorry, if I already asked this before, I apologize. Again, I have 6,000 subscribers. So sometimes it can be hard to keep track of everyone. I guess you could call it a little mini review. I do have reviews of the main 3 Danganronpa games when they came to the Switch. The microphone quality is a bit hit or miss, but I think overall they still hold up pretty well as long as you aren't thrown off by the fact that I have a lot of awkward pauses in there. I didn't review Danganronpa S just because that game is so stupid. But at the same time, I'm really excited for Danganronpa 2x2. You play a bunch of stuff? Very nice, very nice. So do I. I would say that my primary gaming demographic is Nintendo games, but I do some third parties as well. Most of the Pokemon games. The exact opposite of me, but I have played some of the Pokemon games. Like, I loved both Detective Pikachu games. Not enough to be on my best games lists, but they were decent times. I like Pokemon Puzzle League. The Pokemon Snap games were pretty good. Yeah, I think that's about it, unfortunately. But I do plan on playing Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness when that comes to Switch 2. And if there's ever a game that's like Pokemon Cross Fire Emblem, I'd be there. I probably would rent it just in case Pokemon Company ruins it, but I'm a selective Pokemon fan. But what is it that you like about the Pokemon games? I know that it's really unfortunate that the Pokemon Company it doesn't seem like they care about quality control when it comes to the recent games. Because one thing that I heard from one of my friends that really made me sad is one time in her stream I said, it would be great if the Pokemon mainline games would have voice acting. And she said, Pokemon mainline games will never have voice acting. You just got to suck it up. And I said, that's the problem with the Pokemon community. Is they do just suck up these games without holding the company accountable. And so I hope that people like me can advocate for the fans getting quality games that are on par with everything else Nintendo publishes. The world, the Pokemon design struck a chord with you as a kid. That is a good point because there are some pretty neat designs in there. I'm not going to lie. I think what is my favorite Pokemon design? That's a good question. I'll have to think about that one. Because if I do play as a Pokemon in Smash Brothers, I usually play as Lucario. Something about his moveset is just it's cool to like have that aura mechanic. Wait, you actually agree with me as a Pokemon fan, Jungle Running? Oh, I'm so happy to hear that. It's nice to know that my soapbox has reached at least one person. Oh, I am so happy to hear that. Yeah, I've been encouraging people to just stop buying Game Freak's games until they get their act together and make a good Pokemon game and to stop making excuses. Like when Pokemon Legends Arceus came out, there were so many people that said it was this huge leap forward for Pokemon. And you know what I said? I said, look at Breath of the Wild on the Wii U. That's the previous generation of hardware. And it runs and looks and sounds infinitely better in every single way. But because it was a Pokemon game, everyone had to give it a pass and say, wow, this is such a great step forward and it's so immersive. And yet, I guarantee if one of the Zelda games had looked like that, people would have given Nintendo a whole bunch of flack. They would have said something like, why did you not have voice acting? And why do the ground textures look so muddy? And why does this look like a Nintendo 64 game? Now, I get that Pokemon Legends Arceus was one of the better Pokemon games. Not for me. I only played it for an hour before I gave up. But that's because people in Miss Paggle's Discord were saying, like, well, Paul, I know you hate Pokemon games, but you should at least give Arceus a try because it's so much better. And I did. And it wasn't. But I will say this much. I would prefer Pokemon games to go in the direction of Pokemon Legends Arceus over the mainline games. Because I know that Pokemon Scarlet and Violet were open world, but it is one of the least interesting open worlds I've ever seen, besides Wind Waker. That one is just mostly water. It looks so washed out and low budget. And I heard that it runs pretty decently if you play it on Switch 2, but I still think that Nintendo should have just like delisted it from Switch 1 because Switch 2 made it play so much better that they should have just said, yeah, you guys don't deserve all of that 20 frames per second nonsense. Arceus was okay. He played at 100%, really empty compared to Breath of the Wild. Yeah, I only played it for an hour, but I've seen more than enough gameplay of it from my streamer friends. And yeah, it does look very empty. Like, pretty much the only thing you're doing is catching Pokemon. And I get that some people really like that, but that just seems boring to me. At least with Breath of the Wild, you have variety. Like, you have the paraglider, you have climbing, you have the towers, you have the shrines, you have the main objectives, you have the Koroks. There's like so much variety in what you can do. And how you do it is cool too. Like, you could choose to glide, shield surf, ride on a horse, ride on an undead horse, ride on a deer. I remember trying to tell my friend who played Skyrim and not Breath of the Wild, like, the amount of things that you can do in that game is staggeringly cool. And eventually he did play Breath of the Wild, and he admitted, like, yeah, it really does make Skyrim look primitive because they took all those years of what Skyrim did and perfected it. Now, I have played a little bit of Skyrim, and I didn't like it very much. Mainly just because it felt so restrictive. Like, there'd be a mountain, and I wouldn't be able to get around it. Whereas, like, in Breath of the Wild, I could just climb the mountain. And then the dungeons were really confusing, and the combat was slow and clunky and unintuitive. And it just felt like it was made for people that were more willing to think than who wanted the thrill of movement. So unless YouTube is buggering out, there are 3 people watching this. Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate you being there, even if you're just lurking. If you missed any of my stories earlier in the live stream where I was talking about my spiritual encounters, I really hope you'll watch the first part of this video. Although, I will give you guys a second option. If you're thinking to yourself, I don't want to watch a full live stream again, Paul, that's just too long and too boring. I do have these stories elsewhere on my channel if you know where to look. I have a whole playlist called Catholic Heart Work Camp. If you want to look at that, there's plenty of stories of all 8 of my mission trips on there. There's a playlist, I think it's called NCYC, where it has like songs from the National Catholic Youth Conference. And, there's the video called My Experiences at the Steubenville Youth Conference, where I talked about a conference I went to as a teenager. So it's there. It's just that this is like a condensed place for all of those stories all at once. And I might have added a few extra details in there, here and there. Yo, Kevin the Conservative, welcome in. Nightmares connected to the Catholic faith. Okay. I think there's an argument to be made that nightmares are very biblical because Joseph was told in a dream that he should take Mary as his wife, and that's what led to Mary being able to get to Bethlehem to give birth to Jesus. But then there were the people in the book of Genesis, the book of Genesis, where Joseph interpreted people's nightmares. And those nightmares ended up being premonitions of what was going to happen to them. Now, nowadays, things are a bit less clear. But I do think that if there's someone out there with the charism of dream interpretation, assuming that is a real thing, I think it's worth looking into, but I think it's worth, like, maybe not taking it like a revelation, but taking it like a suggestion. Last night you had a nightmare, attacked with someone with a knife, but somehow your clothes were too thick. Then I woke up at 7 a.m. That sounds like it would probably be pretty disturbing. I've had dreams like that too, where like I feel like either someone will try to choke me or someone's about to hurt me, but like I'll have sleep paralysis and I won't be able to run in time. And then I'll also have dreams where I'm like in this really bad situation. And as soon as I snap my fingers, I'll wake up because I'm a lucid dreamer. So sometimes I can like be aware that I'm in a dream. And I can also be aware that if I snap my fingers, I wake up. And it works every single time. It's been completely flawless. But as far as if my dreams mean anything, I have no clue. I can't remember a single dream that I had where it genuinely taught me something. I have had a couple of dreams where I've seen my dead grandpa and he'll be acting as though he's, still back alive and nothing has changed. And that makes me think that maybe that's his way of reaching out to me from the afterlife and saying that that not much really has changed. Like maybe God allowed him to keep his personality in heaven, but just not the sinful parts of his personality. What about lucid dreams? What do you mean about what about? Do you mean like what are lucid dreams? So lucid dreams just mean you're aware that you're dreaming. So like when you're in the dream, you'll say, "Oh, this is a dream and none of this is real. I'm sleeping right now." Like you have that conscious thought. And then you can like influence parts of the dream. Like you might say, "Okay, well if I'm in a dream, then that means that I can fly." And then on command, you start flying. And like in my case, I can, if I realize that I'm in a bad dream, I can snap my fingers and wake up. Now, I don't know if lucid dreaming is connected to the Catholic faith or not. I genuinely have no idea. But that is a really good question, Kevin. I'll have to think about that. Maybe like ask Catholic answers um if there's a genuine answer to that. But I forgot to welcome you. So welcome in, Kevin. Any big news, any things that you're excited about? I know for me, today was a really exciting day because Spike Chunsoft put out a trailer for Danganronpa 2x2. Normally, I don't like to watch those because I like to be surprised when I play my games, but they said it was the voice actor announcement trailer. And it turns out that every single actor from the original English release is reprising their roles for the remake. And that just made my day because they couldn't do that in Japanese because the two of the voice actors had passed away. Yo, it's Hey Girl. By the way, Hey Girl, I don't know if you saw this earlier, but you were actually the one that inspired this entire live stream. And I said I had a whole bunch of spiritual experiences. I don't know if you were watching this whole time or not, but I did I did share quite a lot of amazing stories from my retreats and my mission trips and all that. So if you want to either rewatch this or look through my Catholic playlist or my Catholic Heart Work Camp, um, thank you very much for your suggestion because it means a lot to me that I'm actually able to, what's the word? Someone gave me permission to blab. But welcome in, Hey Girl. How's it going? Are you actually gonna stick around, or were you just saying hi? You're getting over a breakup, Kevin. That's unfortunate. I have had two exes, one of which cheated on me. The other only lasted for 4 days. Oh, cool. Glad you can stick around, Hey Girl. Speaking of which, any good news? Any big stuff going on in your life right now? So lucky that Freddy Krueger is not real. I don't actually know who Freddy Krueger is, so if you'd be willing to share that, that'd be great. Honestly, you guys can share anything in this chat as long as it's not related to needles, because those gross me out. So, like, if it's a cactus, earrings, injections, anything that could even be remotely construed as pokey, just do not talk about it. I will delete the comment if you guys slip up. So just saying. Lucid dreaming. It actually was only a recent occurrence that I was able to lucid dream. I think I've only been able to do it for about, I'd like to say 5 or 6 years. Do I not watch horror films? No, not really. I think I watched like 2 horror films in my entire life. I watched The Ring and that one video where like if you watch it, you get sucked into the TV. I know you're probably thinking of Persona 4, but no, I have played Persona 4 as well. She said it wasn't going to work out. Oh, that stinks. Did you at least decide you would stay friends? Great collection of t-shirts. Oh, thank you, hey girl. I really like hearing that. Thank you so much. Um, I wore this shirt because I recently celebrated Mario Day, and Nintendo celebrated the occasion by releasing Mario vs. Donkey Kong on Nintendo Classics. And I and at the start of my review, which just came out today, by the way, I said, last Mario Day, I was miraculously healed. And my left knee was, oh, since you're here, hey girl, I didn't even tell that story. How many of you have heard the story of how I was healed on Mario Day? Because if you've all heard it, maybe I don't need to repeat it. But if even one person hasn't heard it, I'm going to tell the story because, hey girl, you wanted me to share my spiritual experiences. So I will if you guys want me to. What's an auto? Oh, an autopsy. Gotcha. Okay, cool. Okay, so this was Mario Day of last year. So exactly 1 year and 2 days ago. I was at work and all of a sudden, out of the blue, my left knee just started having this shooting pain. It was so bad that I had to call off early because normally I walk to work, but I was just like, I don't think I'm going to be able to walk to work with this knee being so bad. So the district manager drove me home. And so I slumped on the couch, and my sister came in the room and she said, Paul, what the heck happened to you? And I just said, oh, my left knee is so sore. I can barely stand up and I'm hobbling together. And she said, Paul, there happens to be this program tonight where people are training to be healing ministers. And so I bet they could pray over your left knee. So a couple of hours later, we got to the place and I hobbled toward the girl that was leading me to where I was going to be prayed over. And I said, I am so sorry. I can barely walk right now. And she said, hey, that's what we're here for. So she made sure that I wasn't going to fall over. And I still remember her name. It was Allie. She had brown hair and glasses, and she was wearing jeans, and I think she was wearing a t-shirt as well. And then she led me over to two other people, and their names were Francesca and Mike. Mike was a redhead, and Francesca was really tall and dark-skinned. And they were just so nice. I wish I could have stayed friends with them, but I've never seen them since then. And they just said, we're going to pray over your left knee. And what we want you to do is we want you to just I'll think about that, hey girl. I'll ask my sister if there's a way I can get in touch with them because I know that she knows at least one of them. I do actually remember their last names though, but again, they're so generic that I bet if I were to try searching for them on Facebook, I'd probably get a bunch of results. But anyway, or were you talking to Kevin? But anyway, getting back to the story, they just said, what we want you to do is we want you to just keep asking the Lord for more and more joy. And I felt this like leaping sensation in the pit of my stomach. Like I was laughing and I was just like, oh my gosh, I just feel so wonderful right now. And that was like immediately after they put their hands on my knee. So then they prayed for a couple of minutes and they said, okay, we want you to test to see if it was healed because sometimes it takes a couple of attempts. So we walked over to the stage and I was doing great. But then as I was walking onto the stage, then the knee started hurting again. So they said, yeah, I think we need to pray over it again. So then they prayed over it one more time and then it was perfectly fine. And that knee stayed perfectly fine until the next time I went to work and I told my boss that I was miraculously healed. And right at that moment, the knee pain started up again. But then it never showed up since then. Like I would have other types of knee pain, like maybe on the back of my shins, but not that same sharp shooting pain ever since then. So there you go. That wasn't even a strictly Catholic event. Like that was just anyone who wanted to have the charism of praying over other people. So I know I talk a lot about like how, during Eucharistic adoration, that was when my back and shoulders were healed. And during Holy Communion, that's when I got over lactose intolerance. But no, that goes to show you that even Protestant prayer can be powerful. You can pseudo-lucid dream. Last night when a dream got freaky, you just clench really hard, change the scene. Very nice. I'm glad that you have that ability, Jungle Running. You know, hey girl, I actually thought the same thing as well. So thank you for clarifying. Oh, thank you. I'm glad you thought that was a cool experience. Again, there's so many more that I said before you showed up. But I have just had, like, ever since I was a teenager, I've just had this really profound ability to have this amazing connection with the Lord. Like, I've heard him I've heard him speak to me a few times. And like usually when I'm at I don't think I ever told you guys this. I know I did in my video called Oh, good. Thank you. Hey, girl. I would love that. And hey, if you ever want to chat with me outside of this, as long as you're at least 18, you can always email me. But anyway, there was one time I went on a retreat and I had really, really bad pelvic floor problems. And like the whole retreat, I was like constantly needing to go to the bathroom, like pretty much every hour. And so we started having Eucharistic adoration. And I was like right in the front row. And literally the exact second that the priest turned the monstrance toward us, I felt this really warm sensation in the pelvic floor. And it was this very, very pleasant, very like soothing type of experience. And I stayed at adoration for way longer than I normally would have because I was just like, oh, I've been having so many problems that I never want this to go away. And I did not have to go to the bathroom for another hour and a half after that. Eucharistic adoration is a Catholic process where, do you know what Holy Communion is? Because it's not going to make sense if I don't mention that first. You read the book called 33 Days of Eucharistic Glory. Very nice. Okay, so you know what communion is. So we truly believe that during Holy Communion, the bread and the wine literally turn into the body and blood of Christ. It's a process called transubstantiation, which means that your five senses will tell you that it's just bread and wine, but the substance has changed and the essence of it has changed. And again, I know that firsthand because, like I said, I've literally named like 4 experiences in this video alone where something during either adoration or Holy Communion healed me as a result of truly believing that it was the real presence. And there are like other mini healings that I've had, like for a while, like every single day for like 4 months straight. Every time I would receive communion, if I was sad, I'd suddenly be not sad, or I'd see my grandpa smiling at me down from heaven, or I'd be like crying in joy. And it, like, there's no way that it can be fake with everything that I've been through. Oh, okay. That's good that you have Catholic friends that can teach you. That's good. Oh, yeah. I am so very blessed that God has been so good to me. And I'm hoping that people can I'm hoping that people can realize that modern miracles are very much capable of still happening. And most of my miraculous healings are pretty tame compared to the stuff my sister has witnessed. Like when she was on her missionary trip, there was one moment when there was a guy with a withered arm. And after she and her friends prayed over it, the arm unwithered right in front of them. There was a moment where they were praying the rosary, and then the statue of Mary turned to face them, and it started crying. And then I think at one point, like one of the statues of Jesus levitated. And then the stories of like the saints and the experiences that they've had are really powerful too. And there are several books and several sources of like Eucharistic miracles over the years. There's even one story that stumped the atheists, and that was there was this priest who was saying mass, and he personally doubted that it was really the body and blood of Christ. So as he was holding up the host and he was saying the consecration prayer, suddenly it started bleeding on him. And he was freaking out so much that he took it to a bunch of atheist scientists saying, what the heck is going on? And they were completely bewildered by that because they said, this is human flesh that was pushed to its absolute limits of someone being tortured and starved to death. And that is real blood and that is real flesh that you had in your hands. And now it's in a museum. You were watching a Christian VTuber who was learning about Catholicism. You don't know too much either. Well, hey, you know what? If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. I'll never turn down questions about Catholicism. As for how I got into Catholicism, I was cradle Catholic, which is a term that we use for your parents said you were Catholic. They raised you Catholic. You never really questioned it. But as I've had all of these profound spiritual experiences, and I've had, my miraculous healings and like all these saints speaking to me and these like peaceful feelings I felt when I was like so sad earlier. It's convinced me that even if hypothetically Catholicism wasn't real, then the second thing that I would convert to is Orthodoxy, because they also believe in the real presence of the Eucharist. And even if this was all just a coincidence, it makes more sense than what the Protestants are saying, because I was looking up the Greek translation of John 6, which is everyone's favorite Bible passage, because the Protestants and Catholics hate it when either side brings that up, because that's the passage where Jesus says, Moses gave you bread in the desert and those people died, but the bread that I give you is my flesh. And he kept saying, you must eat my flesh and drink my blood or you will have no life within you. And it was the only passage in the entire 4 Gospels where people walked away from him after he finished talking. But here's where the Greek adds another layer to it. So in Greek, there's actually different words for eating depending on what type of eating you're doing. So the first Greek word that Jesus used was the term used for just general taking in. Like maybe you could take in information if you're reading a book. So like you must take in my flesh. You must absorb it. So in that general sense. So then I swear I combed my hair. My hair just has a mind of its own. Yeah, so at first it did seem like, okay, maybe he's talking about like on a spiritual level, like, okay, take in his words, listen to his teachings. So they said, well, how can this man give us his flesh to eat? So then, after they were confused, then Jesus changed the Greek word that he was using. So then it became, you must gnaw on my flesh. And the specific Greek word there was used for vultures and hyenas that were ripping apart animal meat to tear at the meat because they were starving to death. So he was literally telling, you must chew on my flesh. You must tear into it. You must act as though you're starving. And this is the only thing that you can eat to survive. And it was after he used that Greek word that his disciples stopped following him. Do I go to confession? Yes, I do. Catholics are only required to go to confession once a year if they're in venial sin, but if it's mortal sin, it's recommended to go as soon as possible. It is scary at first, but there are 2 things that really help me feel at ease when I go to confession. The first is priests also have to go to confession too. They can't just forgive their own sins. They have to go to another priest and have that priest absolve them. And priests are just as much as sinners as the rest of us are, if not worse, because they know better. So that means they're more culpable. The other thing that makes me feel at ease during confession is I try to bring some kind of reminder that the priest is the person that's in front of me, but the real person I'm confessing to is Jesus. The priest is just like his mouthpiece. So when the priest is saying, I absolve you of your sins, it's actually Jesus talking. So I usually will like bring like a crucifix or a picture of Jesus when I go to confession. And like sometimes I'll look at that picture instead of looking at the priest when I'm confessing. And then that helps me to be able to do it without freaking out. And I've, on some of the conferences I've been to, I would be in line for confession. And like when I would chaperone, I'd usually be the only adult in line with a bunch of other teenagers. Even though they did say like adults are welcome to go to confession as well. I guess the other chaperones just didn't want to. And there were some teenagers that would say like, "Yeah, I'm super nervous about going to confession." And so I told them exactly what I told you, and then that helped them to not be worried about it. In fact, I have another amazing story since you mentioned going to confession. This was at NCYC 2017. I was in line for confession, and mind you, NCYC stands for National Catholic Youth Conference, and there were 23,000 people there. So obviously there were like priests all over the football stadium ready to hear confession, and the line was really, really long. And after I was waiting in line for, I don't remember how long, it was a pretty long time. One of the adult supervisors for the conference itself, not one of the chaperones, came up to us and she said, "Hey, we just want you to know that there are like hundreds of priests. So if you want to switch lines, you can totally do that." Well, I decided that I wasn't going to switch lines. And so as I stayed in place, another girl walked by and she ended up standing in the spot behind me. And so I looked behind me and I saw that she was wearing a Harry Potter t-shirt. And I said, "Oh my gosh, I love Harry Potter." And so we got to talking about how much we loved the series. But then as the line progressed, we got a pamphlet from the adult organizers that were talking about like what to do when preparing for confession. And something in me stirred and it got me to want to do some kind of motivational speech. So I started talking about my faith and what I had been through, and then that got her comfortable to talk about like what she was going through. And again, I won't repeat it. Don't want to break confidence. Just in case she's watching this, you never know. And as we like got toward the football stadium part of it, because we were like underneath the bleachers going into the football stadium, she shook her head and she said, "You're just an ordinary guy, but yet the way you talk is like one of these keynote speakers." And it led to us, we ended up hugging. And she said, "Paul, I'm going to ask you a really stupid question. And I want you to answer me perfectly honest. Don't try to not hurt my feelings." And I said, "Okay, I'll answer perfectly honestly." And she said, "Paul, do you think someone like me," again, not sharing what she actually said, "do you think someone like me is able to find love in the Catholic Church?" So I thought about it for a really long time. And literally, the timing was just way too perfect. It was right before it was her turn to go to confession. And I said, "I do think that you can find love in the Catholic Church because you are God's daughter and God will find the perfect man for you." Never spoke to her again after that, because right at that moment, after I finished talking, the person said, "Your turn for confession." She took one last fleeting look at me and hurried off to go to confession. So if I took nothing else out of that conference, it was, I hope I made a difference in that girl's life. Oh, thank you. Hey, girl. I really appreciate that. But yeah, that was just one of many great things that happened to me. Oh, thank you. I'm glad you liked hearing about that. There was another incident where I was, I don't want to say what had happened to me before the conference, but something tragic had happened to me before that particular conference. And I was walking down this really quiet, almost deserted hallway. And then at the end of the hallway, I realized that it was a dead end. So I started walking in the other direction. And I sat down next to this random girl. And the girl ended up thanking me for sitting next to her because she said, "As I was watching you go by, I was hoping that you would sit next to me. And when you didn't, I was disappointed. But then you ended up sitting next to me anyway." So I said, "Oh, good. I'm glad that was able to happen." And so, we chit-chatted for a little bit. And then I got really quiet and I started crying. And she said, "Hey, what's wrong?" So then I was telling her about what was bothering me that day. And as I was talking, I started realizing that I needed to be optimistic and I needed to realize God's love. And it ended up being a complete role reversal by the time I finished talking, because I started, like, the tears started drying up and I started being really happy and filled with joy. And the next thing I knew, I'm looking across at her and she started crying. But it was like happy tears because she was smiling while she was crying. And she ended up saying, like, oh, wow, that is such a great perspective to have. So she started out by cheering me up. And by the end of me talking, I ended up cheering her up. And all of that because she wanted to sit next to me. I initially refused, and then I said yes later, and we did it. And like I said early in the stream, I don't know if you were here for this, hey girl, but I like to carry a notebook around whenever I go to these conferences, and I ask people to sign the notebook so that I can always remember their names. So I still remember her name, and I still have like her words of affirmation. I don't remember exactly what she said, but I believe it was something like, "Thank you for your words of wisdom. You will make a wonderful youth minister one day." Because that was a big thing that I had told her. Was at the time I was going through certification classes to become a youth minister, and I failed, but I did still end up chaperoning quite a lot of stuff after that. And even though I failed the certification, I do now currently have a job where I am the assistant catechist to 4th and 5th graders. So even though I never became a full-time youth minister, I was still able to essentially do what I wanted to do in the first place, which was I wanted to teach. I wanted to say, guys, let me tell you all these stories. Let me tell you all this cool stuff. And I mean, this stream has 4 likes, so clearly it worked. And clearly what problem I thought I forgot what I was going to say. Let me see what you have to say here, hey girl. When you question spirituality, you have a problem with viewing Jesus as a conduit to God. Is it possible to have a direct relationship with God, or are they interconnected? So, I hope I'm answering this correctly, but the way that we see God is he's what's called a triune God. You might have heard the phrase the Trinity. So it means that there's God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. They're 3 persons, but it's still the same God. So Jesus oftentimes in the Gospels would say these statements that would imply that he and God were not only equal, but that he was God. So like he'd say, the Father and I are one, or like everything I say comes from the Father. But the thing about the Trinity is that we consider it a mystery. Like, we don't know how it's possible for someone to be 3 persons but still one God. But the closest metaphor, no, they're not meant to be. Well, yes and no. Like, Jesus's incarnation and the person of Jesus is its own person, but yet he's still God, if that makes any sense. And I know that it's hard to grasp, and I'm probably doing a terrible job of explaining it, but the best analogy that I've heard is, take me, for example. I have 3 younger siblings, and I have 5 nieces and nephews. I am a brother to my siblings. I am a son to my parents, and I am an uncle to my nieces and nephews, but I'm still the same Paul. I just take on different roles. So, like, my nieces are going to see me as an uncle. They're not going to see me as a brother. They're not going to see me as their son. So in the same way, there are moments where you can tell, okay, that's Jesus the Son working. That's when you can see more of the Holy Spirit working. So they're technically always working together. It's just, it's hard to explain how they're all equal. But at the same time, I hope I explained that correctly, because it is a very confusing doctrine. But what I've noticed in my faith life is understanding is one of the last steps to being Catholic, in my experience. Because I have found that the times that I haven't understood what was going on were when I had the most profound spiritual encounters. So, for example, There was one mission trip that I went on where I was what was called a candle holder at a program called Four Corners, which meant that like we would pray over the teenagers that would want to be prayed over. And this girl came up to me who was crying so profusely that I couldn't even understand what she was saying. So I didn't want to keep asking her to repeat herself. So I just said, well, let's just pray over you and see what the Holy Spirit has to say. I still couldn't figure out what the Holy Spirit was saying. So I didn't want to just dilly-dally and keep her waiting. So I said, okay, here goes nothing. The next thing I knew, I started speaking about Moses and the burning bush. And as soon as I finished talking, the girl burst into this huge smile and all her tears went away. And she said, that's exactly what I needed to hear, Paul. Thank you so much. You completely solved my problem. And so she walked away being happy. Now, I had no clue what I was doing in that instance. I had no idea what Moses had to do with anything because, again, I couldn't even hear what she was saying. The acoustics were horrible. But yet, in that moment, I surrendered to whatever it was that God wanted me to say. I didn't try to understand it on an intellectual level. I just said, I have faith that it's going to work. Same thing with when I was miraculously healed at Eucharistic adoration. I had never heard of this idea that you could put a cloth under the Eucharist and it would still be considered Jesus's clothes. That was the first time I had ever heard that. But I didn't try to question it. I didn't try to think, how is this logically possible? I just said, if the priest says that it's true, then I'm just going to go for it. And so I just had that, I'm going to give up all ideas of understanding and just have childlike faith. Because Jesus said, you have to have the faith of a child to enter the kingdom of heaven. So I kissed the cloth. Next thing I knew, my back and shoulders were healed. Literally 3 seconds after I finished kissing that cloth. And I'm pretty sure it was because there was no questioning. It was just jumping right in. Jesus saved you when you found out you were catfished? What's a catfish in this context? Worst night of your life and best day of your communion. Your profile picture is your communion. Very nice. Let me get a closer look at that, actually. Go to channel. There we go. Oh, very, very nice. That is cool. That is very cool, Kevin. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, I would agree. Yeah. Open-hearted is generally the best thing to do when it comes to Catholicism. Like, yes, when you're going through RCIA, you do want to comprehend the faith when it comes to like, getting confirmed and stuff like that. Like, you don't want to just say, oh, I'm just going to randomly get confirmed and call it a day. But in terms of like just letting God do stuff in your life, generally speaking, if you have even the littlest amount of faith, then God can do great things for you. Catfishing is when someone tricks you with someone else's pictures. Gotcha. I've never had that happen to me, but the closest thing that I can think of is when someone made that meme of me, and I was not thrilled with that. But that person has since apologized, and I have since really appreciated that you guys are willing to see other stuff. What was I going to say? You have a problem with blind faith, strict morals. You have to think logically and very clearly step by step. The thing is, I'm also like that. So you would think that I would struggle with that. But there is a logic to it. Like when the priest told me that story about the woman with hemorrhages and how all she did was touch Jesus's clothes. And she said, if we believe that that is Jesus's body, then that would logically mean that those cloths are Jesus' clothes. So I figured it may not be like objectively logical, but it's a form of logic that says if this is true, then that means this is true as well. So if that's the case, then I'm going to be healed. And I was. And I do feel like the way he presented it, because it was on a mission trip for high schoolers. So obviously he wanted to put it to like their level. All he really said was, we believe that that's actually Jesus. So therefore, those cloths are his clothes. There you go. For example, if Jesus died for our sins, doesn't that give everyone a free pass to be sinners, since he died for us and absolved us? So Jesus dying for our sins doesn't absolve us from our choice to sin. What it means is that we are given the gift of his forgiveness so that we can enter heaven. Because if it weren't for Jesus dying for our sins, there would be no way for us to be accountable for the sins that we do. God would just say, you're just too wretched of a person. You'd never be able to enter heaven. So Jesus took on the punishment of every single person in human history and said, I'm going to take on the punishment. So even though the Catholic Church will teach you about a process called purgatory, at the same time, purgatory is just that final cleansing, but it's not the punishment for our sins. No, ask as many questions as you want, hey girl. If anything, the more questions, the better. I'm actually really happy when you ask questions. Hello, Jevel. Glad that you could be here. I do not like to watch those Mario Galaxy trailers, but I'm happy for you. I do know one thing you're going to be very happy about. Every single English voice actor from Goodbye Despair is returning for the remake. Which, for me, that was mind-blowing when I found out Todd Haberkorn was returning in particular, because I got to meet Todd Haberkorn at 2025's at 2025's Twitter. Not Twitter. I got mixed up with what you just said, Jeff. At 2025's Comic-Con. And Todd had said, hey, I'm working on this project that I'm not allowed to talk about, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be on a Nintendo system, so you should be able to see it. And considering that the context of that was that I was talking about how much I liked how good he did in Danganronpa, I'm pretty sure he was hinting at Danganronpa 2x2, because at the time, this was May of 2025, Danganronpa 2x2 hadn't been announced. So I had no clue what he was talking about, but now I do. I'm pretty sure he was talking about Danganronpa 2x2, because why else would he bring that up? Yes. Oh, actually, no, I didn't know that, Jevel. You're amazed at how I remember all those details? The thing is, hey girl, and you'll probably get to this point eventually too, when you've received a profound spiritual experience, you tend to be like really obsessed about the details, even if you're not a detail-oriented person, because it's something so unusual and so like a lot of people don't even know how to describe their miraculous occurrences because it feels so otherworldly. They're like, I've never felt this sensation before. I just feel so happy. I've never felt this elated. And that's why I think so many people have a hard time believing in miraculous occurrences, because they're so like, people are like, I don't even know how to explain it. Like people who have had near-death experiences hardly know how to describe heaven. But the details that you do remember, they tend to be even more vivid than anything else. Like, I generally have a pretty good memory. But if you were to ask me what things do you remember the most clearly in your life, without question, it would be all of the Catholic Heart work camps that I went on, when I was miraculously healed, and all the spiritual encounters I've had. Like, sure, I might remember other milestones in my life. Like, I remember I was with my girlfriend and my friend Nick when Breath of the Wild came out. Like, I remember that. But I remember my miraculous healings way more. Oh, thank you, Jungle Running. That means a lot to me. You're a bit new to this channel, but I used to call these the world's most boring live streams. So thank you for giving me permission to think that they're Jevel, I'm sorry, I completely missed your message. I read it, but it didn't register in my mind. I don't know what. Oh, I do know what Dragon Ball Z is, but I didn't know Kyle read it. I don't know what DBS is though. Um, hey, girl, if you have more spiritual experiences, feel free to share them. I would love to hear them. Hey, if I'm allowed to blab to you guys can blab to me. That is totally cool by me. Yes, I feel the same way, hey girl. Like if you were to ask me about like the 12 girls that hugged me on my first mission trip, I can literally tell you what my left hand was feeling when I had that moment because it was so profound. Dragon Ball is your favorite animation franchise. So much lore and world building. Okay, I've never been into Dragon Ball, but I've heard that it has really good action sequences. Is that true, or am I thinking of something else? Dragon Ball Super. I'd never heard of Dragon Ball Super. Then again, you know by now, Jevil, that I'm a very uncultured guy. Again, you're talking to a guy who still uses a flip phone and who will still refer to iPods as though they're still a thing. I actually still have a t shirt from my very first mission trip that has an iPod on the back of it. And I feel like if I were to talk to teenagers nowadays, they would probably say something like, "What the heck is that?" And then they'll look at the year on it and be like, "Oh, you're one of those people, huh?" But yeah, like if I were to hypothetically go back to that school where I was miraculously healed, I can 99% guarantee you I'd be able to point out the exact location where I was standing when I was miraculously healed because I remember the angle at which everything was. I remember where the monstrance was sitting. I remember like where the adult leader was. It was on that side of the room. And I remember where the nurse's office was. I'd be able to point out every single step of that because it was one of the most powerful experiences of my life. And like I said, I normally have a good memory anyway, but like when I got out of depression, um, when I stopped being sexist, all of that is just like boom, 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 detail after detail. I bet you'll get to that point too, hey girl. I'm not too good with intuitive hunches, but I'm having one right now. I feel like you are just getting started on your spiritual journey, and you may not ever become Catholic, but I feel like you'll come pretty darn close because you seem like you're pretty open minded. And I feel like if you just keep up that tiny little bit of open mindedness, again, assuming I'm reading everything you're saying correctly, amazing things will happen to you if you just give yourself that faith, honestly. Yoshi being cast by Donald Glover. I don't actually know who Donald Glover is. Oh, young Lando Calrissian. I haven't watched Han Solo, so that's news to me. Spider-Man Home. He is Prowler. Oh, that's who he is. Okay. Is that Uncle Terrence? Sorry. Sorry. It's not Uncle Terrence, it's Uncle Aaron. I accidentally say Uncle Terrence cuz he looks like a coworker I used to have named Terrence. So because they look so alike, when I'm talking to my sister, I'll accidentally call him Uncle Terrence because he reminds me of my former coworker so much. Now, just wait. The next time I talk to the actual Terrence, I'll probably call him Aaron. Oh, man. But yeah, no, I love Spider-Verse, and I'm really looking forward to Beyond the Spider-Verse. And the thing about the multiverse is, I personally believe that the multiverse technically exists, but the only person who can access it is God. And that's how God knows everything. Because there are times in the Gospels where he refers to these what if scenarios. Like he'll say, if Sodom and Gomorrah had seen me come to them, the city would still be standing. And since we know that Jesus always keeps his promises, we can be certain that that alternate universe exists. Even if we can never get to it, he was able to access it. But I am of the belief that even if there's an alternate universe out there, I do not want to be transported to it if there ever is such a thing. I personally am of the belief that I am in the best timeline because I have had so many amazing experiences, and the world has just had so many great inventions, and you guys are all great. Um, I wouldn't trade anything. I wouldn't want to be in a universe where there's a different Paul, because the slightest thing could go wrong and ruin everything. I'm just so happy with my life that I don't want to risk it all disappearing for the sake of time travel or pseudoscience. You truly feel that we are consciousness who is a guest in our body on this earth. I would agree with that, actually, because as Catholics, we believe that what gives us personality is what's called the soul. And when we die, the soul leaves the body and departs to another realm, either heaven or hell. And our lives are an experience, a gift from God. I would agree with that too. Yeah, I would 100% agree. But the Catholic Church does believe that at some point in time, our bodies will eventually also resurrect. So at this point in time, if a person dies tomorrow, the soul will leave the body and enter another realm. But at some point, their body will like reform from all the ashes, and then that body will like reunite with the soul. But it'll be like a perfected body. So, like, say you have scoliosis, you won't have scoliosis anymore. Say you wear glasses, you won't wear glasses anymore. It'll be like a perfect version of your body. For now, Paul, until we have perfected technology to travel outside our galaxy, even if we do perfect technology, I'm happy enough with the one we're in. You do have a problem with sufferers. Some people, or especially children who are innocent and get killed and suffer. Why are they suffering? Why are they so unlucky? That is a really tough question that the Bible gives a very interesting answer to. So there's a book in the Bible called the Book of Job. And the reason it's called that is because the main character's name is Job, and he has this really amazing life. And he has, like, lots of property and lots of cattle, and he's just like the happiest man in the world, and he's a righteous man. Like, he believes in God, follows all the teachings, and then one day he loses everything. And he wonders, what did I do wrong? I am this righteous man, and yet I've lost everything. Does God hate me? And so most of the book, for like 8 chapters straight, is just him wondering, like, what kind of a God does this? And so by the end of the book, God himself shows up and starts talking to Job. But instead of answering Job's question, God says, if you think you know me so well, then let me ask you some questions of my own. And God takes like an entire chapter of asking questions. And again, I don't remember all of them, but it was something like, do you know how the world is able to stand up without falling down? Do you know how all the animals know what they're doing without some kind of rule book? Do you know who created the stars? What causes the stars to still be illuminating? And he's asking all these questions about, like, how does this work? How does this work? How does this work? And Job can't answer a single one of them. So the overall message is, we don't know why God allows suffering, but we do know that there are results that come from it. Because let me tell you, if it weren't for my suffering in life, I would not be as happy as I am now, because my suffering was necessary to appreciate my joy. So, for example, yes, my family is going through this horrible, terrible thing that's been going on ever since Good Friday. A lot of innocent people have suffered with what we're going through. But as a result of our suffering, my brother and his wife are now stronger in their faith than ever. And my brother has turned into this way more compassionate person. He and his wife now, like, will spend more time together at night, like praying with each other and supporting each other. And now, like, they and their kids are stronger. We as a family are stronger. It was the first time ever after this happened that my sister-in-law went up to my mother, which is her mother-in-law, and she called her mom, because she didn't get along with her mom very well. So the fact that she was finally willing to accept, this is my mother now, even if we're not related by blood, we're still related by family. So it drew us together as a result of our shared suffering. So sure, that might be just my example. Why do other children suffer? We just don't know what's going to happen, but we know that it'll eventually happen. And when it does, it'll all make sense. And the example that I give is Harry Potter. But let me answer Jebel's question first. This universe has problems, ton of conflict. I do believe in a world of light within the earths. The thing about conflict is there's always a resolution. We just don't know how the resolution is going to happen yet. This is going to be some slight spoilers. But there's a moment in the 7th book where Harry is particularly angry about the mission that he's given. Oh, I 100% agree. Hey, girl, I hate conjecture as well. But the older I get, the more I realize that if I'm going to have faith, I'm going to need to have I'm going to need to have hope. You know, the hope that Danganronpa taught me of just like, you don't know the answers, but if you don't have hope, then you're as good as dead. But anyway, I related this to Harry Potter when I was on one of my mission trips. And I said to a bunch of crying girls, there was one point in Deathly Hallows, and I'm pretty sure you all know what I'm talking about if you've read Harry Potter, where Harry is thinking over the mission that he's given. And he's angry at the person who gave him the mission. Again, I'm trying not to spoil too much. And he's like, why did this person put me on this meandering quest? What is the meaning of all this? Why didn't this person give me any answers? Why am I floundering around in the dark? Why do I have no guidance? And he's shouting so loud that the birds in the trees fly out because they're so afraid of his loud voice. And he says, I was never loved. I was hated. My parents are gone. Everyone hates me. I'm all alone. And by the end of the book, he has a profound experience where he like has this, and again, I'm trying not to spoil it, but he receives this like guidance from someone who had died, who knew more answers than he did. And that person said, if it weren't for the fact that I withheld the information from Harry, he wouldn't have had the strength to be able to do what is necessary. So by the time Harry heard that, he said, oh, you're right. I wouldn't have gone through with it if I had been told that ahead of time. So the reason why I had to suffer was because I had to have faith that there was going to be an answer, even if I didn't understand the answer. And as a result, by the end of Deathly Hallows, Harry became the most powerful wizard in all of the wizarding world, even more powerful than Dumbledore and Voldemort. And his power was so great, again, I don't want to spoil it. He did things that even Dumbledore and Voldemort couldn't do. And it was all because he had love, he had faith, and he showed mercy. I think I can go ahead and spoil that. He tried to have mercy on Voldemort. He tried to say, you know what, Voldemort, I forgive you for murdering my parents, and I forgive you for putting me on this meandering path and for torturing so many people. I am giving you permission, because I am the most powerful wizard in the world, to show remorse, to be a man again, so that we don't have to go through with this battle. And of course, Voldemort doesn't listen, but like, think about that for a moment. So many people in this world are filled with hatred and political ideologies that, like, Rowling so much as says women have uteruses, and people are like trying to threaten her and put her to death. But yet this same author wrote about a boy whose parents were killed, and he was tortured, and he was forced to do all sorts of very stressful things for like 17 years straight, and he forgave that guy. So if Harry can forgive a murderer and a torturer and someone who thinks it's fun for people to suffer, surely we can also forgive those who disagree with us politically. What you're saying, Paul, you believe in a world that light outshines darkness, kind of like the good ending in Smash. I agree. Oh, I 100% agree, Javel. I think that darkness is just loud. So when people are suffering and when bad things are happening, we forget about the good. And that's why I believe that that's why God said in the book of Genesis, the very first thing that he said wasn't good in this world was being alone. Like, all throughout the book of Genesis prior to that, he kept saying this is good. Like, he made the trees and he said this is good. And I made the animals and this is good. I made man, this is very good. So as soon as he made us human beings who can comprehend good and evil, he said this is very good. and I have completed my work. We were the last things that he made, because the last shall be first. But then, as soon as he realized that it was just Adam and not Eve, he said, "It is not good for man to be alone." So then he said, "I will make for him a helper." And that's when he made a woman. And while I do think that passage is primarily talking about marriage, I think it's also talking about how we as humans are meant to be a community. Because I got out of depression by talking to a group of 6 girls. And then those 6 girls were saying the same things as my friends. The reason I've been able to make it through my family situation is because I've had my family and I've had my friends that are able to give their perspectives, and we can hug each other and we can like press onto each other's shoulders and get all the oxytocin from all that touch. And so I think if we were forced to live life alone, we would be the most miserable people in the world. And I truly do believe that the saddest person in the world right now is the person who has no friends. Oh, yeah, there is so much good in the world. It's just so hard to see it, because there's another verse in the book of Job where God is like arguing with the demons. And one of the demons says, "Lord, I want your permission to hurt Job as much as possible, because if he suffers, then he'll not have faith in you." And so God said, "Okay, as long as you don't kill him." So it goes to show you that sometimes there's a greater meaning to our suffering. You do have some very good, kind, loyal friends, but you do feel, hey, you know what? I hope that as long as you're in my live streams, you never feel alone. Because that was what I felt when I was first kicked out of school. Was I felt like I had no one. And once I started getting into youth group, and especially once I stopped being a teenager and stopped being so hormonal, my friends were what got me out of everything. And I feel like I can never thank them enough for all that they've done. They've just been so, like, they're not perfect. They're humans. But they've given me so many different perspectives on life, and they've done such a great job of encouraging me when I think I'm doing terrible, that I think my friends, besides God, are the most precious things I have in the world. And that's why whenever I start my videos, I start them by saying, "Good evening, afternoon, or good morning, my friends." Because I do hope that people can see my channel as kind of like a refuge. Like, if they have no one else, they can have this channel. Because I'm going to be the world's longest running YouTuber. I don't know if I've mentioned that to all of you yet. And so, if you're the type of person that doesn't like change, and you don't like, I don't know, like, you don't like people leaving you, yours truly is going to be here basically forever, it seems like at this point. But I actually have met 2 people in person that started out as just commenters. I met Tyria in person. She started out as just a commenter, and I've met Isabel in person. In fact, this April 9th through 13th to be exact, she and her sister are going to be coming to visit me here in my home state, and that'll be the 4th time we've met up in person. And it all started with just her commenting on one of my videos. So I believe that reunions come in all shapes and sizes. Like, I've reunited with people from the mission trips that I've went on, and some by accident, some on purpose. In fact, one of the coolest stories I have of meeting up with someone from my mission trip, there was a girl named Claire that really made a difference in my life on my very first mission trip. So then we found out that we were going to NCYC. We weren't going in the same youth group. We just happened to both be going. So I said, well, I've never been to this conference before, so let's just meet up in front of where the dance party is going to be. And she said, okay. The day before the dance party, I was waiting for one of the modules to start, and I saw this girl walking by. Now, I have really, really bad face blindness. Like, for a while, I didn't even remember the face of the girl I was interested in. But I saw that girl, and something in me just said, you know what? I think I'd like to go sit next to her. So her back was turned to me, and I tapped her on the shoulder, and I said, is this seat taken? She turned around, and it turned out it was her. And so we gave each other a huge hug, broke apart, gave each other another hug, and then we ended up sitting together for the rest of the module. And then I said to her, we met up early. We didn't even intend to go to the same module together. Would you like to meet up again in front of the dance party? And then we did. So we had planned to meet up with each other once. We ended up meeting up with each other twice. I also got to meet up with friends from another mission trip twice, even though it was only supposed to be once. They found me when I was at a pizza place. And, I got a picture with them and everything. Why I didn't get a picture with Claire, I don't know. I feel so stupid in retrospect. But then, as Claire and I were sitting outside of the dance party room, those people from my other mission trip came out and they saw us sitting down. And at that moment, Claire had to go reunite with her youth group. So I quickly said, Claire, these are my friends from this one mission trip. Guys, this is Claire. She's a girl that changed my life. And that's the last thing I ever said to Claire before she disappeared. So if that kind of accidental reunion can happen, I'm pretty certain that I will eventually meet someone on this channel. In fact, I'm fairly certain I will be able to do that because, hey girl, you were here when Catholic Kyle came into the chat and he invited me to the Catholic Creator Conference. I'm still working out how I'm going to get there because there's some logistical things I have to sort out. But if I do go, I talked to him on the phone and he said, if you go there, Paul, I can almost guarantee that there will be at least a couple of people that know you. In fact, I know for a fact there will be at least one person there that knows me because he said, because you also remember Haley showed up that day. And he said, yeah, she's one of the primary organizers, so you'll be able to meet one of your subscribers. So I am pretty confident that there will be some person that I wasn't expecting to meet up with that I will meet up if I go to that conference. For every angel God has serving him, an angel falls. With every demon that serves a demon, that serves the devil, a demon is lost. I do feel like that if angels can turn, so can demons turn as well. So the way that the Catholic Church teaches about angels and demons is that we believe that angels had a very different creation story than we did. So God created the angels before he created the earth. And they were given what was called the beatific vision, which meant that they saw God as he is. No conceptual stuff, no Bible passages. They just flat out saw him face to face. And God told them literally every single detail of his plan for all of human history. And Lucifer, which was one of the most powerful angels that God had created, said, well, I think this is a bunch of baloney. Why are you giving humans all of this power when we angels are vastly superior? And he was so persuasive with his wisdom and with his words that he convinced a third of the angels to join him. But here's the thing. God knew that they would never repent because they did know everything, and they still decided to rebel. So that's why we as humans, I feel like we have our own sort of blessing because we weren't given that instant vision. None of us know everything about God when we're born. In fact, we know nothing when we're born. And life is just a series of us learning how the world works and what eternity is going to be. But I think we can learn from Satan and just don't be prideful. Admit that we don't know everything and we're all on a journey of discovery, literally and figuratively. Because I went on 8 mission trips, and boy, did those journeys feel like they were these powerful Deathly Hallows type of experiences. In fact, one of my mission trips was on the same weekend that Deathly Hallows Part 2 came out in the theater. Unfortunately, we did not see it on that mission trip, but there was a lot of talk about we had this conspiracy theory that the people running the mission trip had snuck out at night to go and see the movie while we were all trapped at the school. So one girl came onto the stage on the last day and she was wearing round glasses, and we all thought that they were Harry Potter glasses. And so we booed her, only for me to find out years later that those were her real glasses. And it was just a coincidence that it happened to be on the same day that Deathly Hallows Part 2 came out. In fact, I later learned that the camp staff members would have been ridiculous if they snuck out to go watch Harry Potter because they have such little free time that they would have wasted all that time when they were supposed to be serving us. So, yes, I was too much of a Harry Potter fanboy back then to see the truth. And it's definitely one of my biggest regrets on those trips is why didn't it ever cross my mind that she just needed glasses and they weren't Harry Potter glasses. Hey, you can derail the conversation as much as you want, Jungle Runnin'. I know Jevil does that all the time, and I love it because that way no one feels left out. What games am I playing as far as right now, or what games am I looking forward to? As of right now, nothing, because I just finished Mario vs. Donkey Kong. In fact, the review just came out today if you're interested. As far as games I'm looking forward to, there's the Switch 2 edition of Super Mario Bros. Wonder, Danganronpa 2x2, Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and the eventual Part 3. A secret game that I'm not allowed to say, but I was talking to the developer earlier today, and we were discussing a few ways of how we can spread the word about his game. And he is going to give me a review copy whenever it comes to the Switch. There's second RZ game whenever that comes out. Deltarune, of course, I'm looking forward to the later chapters. Doesn't playing games stress you guys out because it's like constantly competing to get to the next level? Depends on the game, really. Because in games like Mario vs. Donkey Kong, there's a timer, and that does stress me out a lot because I'm a journey over the destination type of person. So usually the way that I figure out puzzle games is I experiment and say like, okay, is this possible within the game's code? And if it is, then I say, okay, how can I take this to the next level? But if I have a timer, I have to like quickly figure out the puzzle on the spot. Excuse me for a minute, guys. I have to have my dinner tray set up. So I will be right back. Let me just pop this right here for now. All right. I hope you guys don't mind the sounds of chewing. But like games where I don't have a timer, like for example, Zero Escape. Those games let me take my time and just explore the room at my own pace. And then like when you're not in the escape rooms in Zero Escape, you're you're just reading with like choices here and there that'll say like, okay, you have two doors. Which door are you going to go through? But you usually don't have a time limit when making those. You too. Very nice. You usually don't have a time limit when making those decisions until Zero Time Dilemma. But the kind of games that stress me out the most are shooters and MMOs. Because I tried playing a real-time strategy game when I played Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade. Because there's a part of the game where there's a real-time strategy moment, and I just barely beat it. And unfortunately, it's required. Shooters, I'm dreadful at. I can't even shoot stationary balloons in Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour. Rice and chicken sounds really good. I have chicken and cheese wraps right here. But I think that's all the games that I'm looking forward to. I'm trying to think, am I missing any? Shoot and Order is getting a physical version. I know, this is one of the longest live streams I've had in recent memory. The villain Samasu has the same idea, where he thinks mortals shouldn't be offered help from a god and mortals only cause their own conflict. Yeah, I think anyone that thinks that they know everything is actually more ignorant. Because I feel like the smartest people in the world are the ones that recognize their own limitations and use that to their advantage. Because people who think that they're intelligent tend to be cocky. And that's why companies like Nintendo drive me crazy. Because they got big headed after the success of the Switch 2. And now they think that, oh, we're these unstoppable titans because the Switch 2 or the Switch was such a success. So we'll just do anything for the Switch 2 and people will like it because they're idiots. So it makes me think that something is going to come up either this generation or the next that'll humble them, and then they'll try to do damage control, but then they'll get cocky after the next thing comes out and they'll just repeat the cycle. They have been repeating that cycle ever since 1995, because the Super Nintendo was popular, then the Virtual Boy was a flop, then the Nintendo 64 was so-so, but then the GameCube flopped. Then the Wii was a huge success, and then the Wii U flopped. And then the Switch was a huge success, and then the Switch 2, yes, it's technically the fastest selling system, but it's flopped in terms of there's a lot of bad press around it. And not a whole lot of people are happy with Nintendo right now. Whereas during the Switch era, people were like, oh, it's finally redeemed the Wii U, and Breath of the Wild is a 10 out of 10 masterpiece. So it felt like they were invincible during that era. I would love a Fire Emblem themed Switch 2. I don't think I'll ever buy one, but it would be a nice option if, like, say my Switch 2 broke. I was thinking about how recently. Oh, where did Kevin? Yeah, that's a good question, hey girl. Yeah, that is a good question. Well, that's good that you guys are able to talk to each other. I do like it when people find community within my community. Yeah, that is crazy. That the Wii U and GameCube were really good systems. I mean, when I got Breath of the Wild on the Wii U at launch, I didn't think to myself, "Oh, I'm getting the inferior version because the Switch just came out." I thought, "Wow, this is so much better than what Nintendo offered for the previous generation." So I saw it as like a new beginning for a new Nintendo. Nope, not gonna eat dessert. But if I could eat dessert, it would be a Hershey's pie from Burger King. I do have applesauce though that I'm gonna be eating after I'm finished with this last chicken and cheese roll. Oh yeah, I love Nintendo Land. Wasn't particularly good at it, but it was so much fun when I had friends. I actually quite like Welcome Tour. I know it's not perfect, and it didn't make my best games of the year list for 2025, but it had some cool tech. I think even Hey Girl would like it, because I think even if you're not a gamer, you can appreciate tech. Like if I were to show you the mini game where you're playing maracas and you can switch between a giant ball and a bunch of tiny beads, you'd be like, oh my gosh, this feels like real maracas. Or when you're asked to saw down a tree, you'd probably feel like you were actually holding a saw. Like that kind of stuff. I feel like it has that wide audience appeal, but then it ruins the wide audience appeal when it has all these quizzes about like HD and um, GPU and variable refresh rates and all that technical stuff, which is why I personally feel like it is a bit too hardcore for the mainstream audience. Oh, I would love to see Fire Emblem and Xenoblade acknowledged more. I love Fire Emblem and Xenoblade so much. I don't love them perfectly though, because I didn't like Xenoblade X. Conceptually, it was good, but it was just way too hard to get into. You want to talk about a technical game that stresses me out? That game. I got to chapter 9 and I just could not beat that boss, even though I grinded to be above his level and toned down the difficulty. From what I heard, I wasn't missing much though. But earlier when you saw my eyes widen, I was thinking about how my sister and I. No, you're not bothering me at all. If anything, you're actually being really good company. This is actually one of my favorite live streams that I've ever done, if you can believe it. Have I ever played the Xenosaga games? No, I haven't. But I have played all three versions of Xenoblade 1, except for the Wii U Virtual Console version, but that's basically just a port. I played Xenoblade 2 and Torna, 3, and Xenoblade X Definitive Edition. Haven't played the original Xenoblade X. I borrowed it for a while, but then I never finished it for some reason. A Fire Emblem minigame in Nintendo Land. Hypothetical Nintendo Land 2? I'd have to think about that, Jebel, because I'm not good with hypotheticals. I'll probably say Splatoon would be better for a Nintendo Land 2, because that has more mass appeal. Like, Splatoon is easy enough to understand on a conceptual level. Like I said, if you were to take someone who doesn't play a game and tell them, shoot paint on the ground, whoever has the most paint wins. The only trouble they'd have is optimizing that paint. So, like, knowing, okay, how do I shoot the opponent? How do I aim the gun? That would be the hard part. The easy part is knowing what you have to do. But Xenoblade, that is one of the least accessible games I have ever played. It is so complicated that when I was reviewing Xenoblade Chronicles 3, I just had auto battle on the whole time. Because there's so much technical stuff that to this day, I'm not even sure how I beat most of those games. But in my opinion, the best games out there are the ones that have simple systems, but if you master them, you can really break the game. That's why I love Thousand Year Door so much. The combat is stupid simple to learn, but actually mastering it is the hard part. You saw someone playing Pokopia. Yeah. Yeah, Pokopia is not for me. Not just because it's Pokemon, just because I cannot, for the life of me, play those build it yourself types of games. So anyway, I keep getting interrupted. But earlier you guys saw my eyes widen. And the reason for that is that, hey girl, you had requested that I talked about spiritual experiences. And one of those experiences that I had just recalled in that moment was my sister had prayed over me one time, and God revealed to her the reason for my entire existence on this earth. And I felt so honored that God would choose me of all people to like reveal that to. Because can you think of any other person that God has said that to? She did share it with me. And um, I've been debating with how much of that vision I should share because it wasn't clear whether God meant it to be private. But I think one thing that I am allowed to share is that God said, Paul, the reason I have put you on this earth is so that you can strengthen and encourage people. And it got me thinking about how all my life I've always thought that I've never been good at changing people's minds on things. I've never been good at talking to a Protestant and saying you should become Catholic. But whenever I'm around people that are already Catholic and already open-minded, I teach them things about the faith that they've never learned. And so they say, now I'm a better Catholic because of the way you explained things. So I think that's what he meant by strengthening people instead of bringing people to the faith, because he never mentioned anything about that to the sort. And so ever since I heard that, I've been trying to find opportunities where I can just tell as many stories as possible and just hope that my experiences with spirituality will hopefully give people new perspectives, and it'll get people thinking about like, okay, Paul's just an average guy. He doesn't have like all these crazy achievements. But yet God was willing to come down to someone so ordinary and so average. Like even my name is average. And yet all these great things happened. Because usually I think most people have the mistaken impression that you have to be like full of childlike faith to get a miracle. Like all the saints would put like ashes on their food and stuff like that. And that's why the miracles happen to them. But I've had my fair share of not so great moments in my life. Let's see what you had to say there. Hey girl, you're raised by atheists, but they told you to always study and learn, so that made you look into spirituality. That's good. I'm glad to hear that. I'm the type of person that I fully believe the statement in Revenge of the Sith where Obi-Wan says only a Sith deals in absolutes. So that's why I shouldn't say never. I try not to make statements where I use the phrases always or never for something. Because if you do that, then you're essentially admitting that you're closed-minded. And you're not willing to accept that you could be wrong or there could be information that you don't know. That's why I never say my favorite game of all time. I will say this is my current favorite game at present. And as a result, my favorite game has actually changed quite a bit over the years. When I first played Twilight Princess, I considered that my favorite game. And then Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright came out. And then that became my favorite game. And then Breath of the Wild, when that came out, and then Tears of the Kingdom. So who knows what game is going to take over next. I'm allowed to watch horror movies, I just don't like them. I don't like too many movies to begin with, but I do like the Mario movie. You have had very spiritual experiences in your life. Your father, who passed away very young, has been in your life as a guardian angel. You know, that's not too far off from what we Catholics believe. Like, we believe that guardian angels are their own separate entities, but in a manner of speaking, the saints are actually closer to us after death than they are in life, because we believe that what the saints are doing in heaven right now is they are praying for us to join them. Obviously, we don't worship the saints. They weren't the ones that died on the cross for us. They just are praying just like we are. Just like you guys could say, hey, Paul, would you be willing to pray for me? We believe, well, if the saints are right there with God, their prayers would be even more effective than ours because they've been purged from sin and we haven't. But I know that the communion of saints is real because I've had so many experiences and so many dreams where I've seen like my grandpa smiling at me, or I'll see like these really beautiful sights that I know just aren't just my imagination. And usually when I talk about them, my mom will say, I got the same sensation. No, I've actually never smoked a cigarette. Because my grandpa smoked cigarettes and that's what killed him. So I told myself I would never smoke so that I wouldn't have to go through what he did. Oh, I will absolutely pray for you, hey girl. I did not physically watch my grandpa die of lung cancer, but my mom described what he went through. At one point, he could barely breathe because his lungs were covered in blackness. And they had to pound on his back just to get him to be able to have some oxygen. That's all I remember from what she told me he went through. But she said that, like, he was in a real bad state. Religion is a lot more complicated than you would think. Like, so many people say, oh, the Catholic Church hates this, but it's like I said, only Siths deal in absolutes. So you don't want to say the church will always hate this. Because, for example, a lot of people are under the impression that Catholics are never allowed to look at porn, which is true. You don't want to have a porn addiction. But I was really surprised when I heard this Catholic YouTuber say there is one instance where a Catholic could look at porn and not be in sin. And I said, how can that be? There's no such thing as good porn. And the example that was given was people on YouTube who are moderators who have to make sure that content is safe and doesn't get into the kids sections would have to look at porn to verify that it is porn so that other people won't watch it. But as long as they're not using it to objectify people, and I say people because men can be objectified in porn too. There are such things as women's porn. Personally, I kind of feel like I might have been subjected to female porn unintentionally because my ex cheated on me. And I think she might have been envisioning all of these things about men that I just couldn't give her. And that's ultimately why I don't like porn, is it's all based on lies. Ooh, you guys are getting some good conversations here. I'm really happy to see that. You know, hey girl, when you start feeling other people's pain, that is a good sign that you are starting to get closer to spirituality. Because yes, I know that atheists and agnostics can be empathetic, but religious people tend to go a step further than that. And they will, how do I word this? It's hard to explain. Like, atheists will come at suffering from a logical level, like maybe we just need to reform the system. Christians will come at it from we need to respect the dignity of the person. So then not only are you helping the suffering, but then you're thinking about the inherent value of human beings. And that makes you think of like, well, what are humans' rights? And so that's why you won't hear me saying things like black rights or trans rights. I'll just say human rights, because I think every single human in the history of ever, no matter what you identify as, has human rights. And no one should take those away. But rights are different from demands. And the reason why we know the difference between a right and a demand is that if you look at the Constitution, it says we have God-given rights. And I do not know how else to say that because I'm not much of a political guy. But I do know that I hope that no matter what political affiliation or gender identity someone is, I hope that I can treat everyone with kindness and compassion and try to find the common ground so that instead of arguing about where we differ, we rejoice on where we're the same. What's just overactive imagination? Oh, the fact that you feel the pain. Gotcha. A lot of anime has censorship of blood. Okay. Yeah, I heard that it was Mortal Kombat that invented the ESRB because they said that's just too violent for us not to have an age rating on this video game. All right. There we go. Now we can get back to a more comfy seating. Hopefully I explained all that correctly. But yeah, I don't like arguments about differences all that much. Like, whenever I'm around people who are different than me, the first thing that I try to do is I try to find common ground. Like if I'm talking to, I mean, you could name anything that's different from me, and I'll try to find common ground. Like when I'm around girls, for example, I'll try to point out that there are actually quite a lot of anatomical similarities between men and women if you know where to look. And so then I'll also point out like how both men and women are humans and there's a lot of similarities between just all human beings in general. If I'm around black people, I'll just think, okay, my hair has a little bit of curl, so I can kind of relate to that kinky curly, as my mom calls it, type of hair. I may not have as curly of hair as them, but I can relate to a certain extent. So relatability is a big thing for me. Just what is the common ground between everyone? And mind you, I used to hate women. I used to be so sexist. I was probably the most sexist person you would ever meet. Like I said in the last live stream, hey girl, I thought that guys were the cursed ones and girls were the blessed ones. And God like favored women. And it took a lot of time for me to get out of that mindset. I think if you're a straightforward, genuine person, it is the best thing to be. Yeah, I agree. If there's one thing I really, really hate in this world, it's lying. But even then, taking that statement, only a Sith deals in absolutes. I used to think that every single lie was terrible and an awful sin. But then Isabel recently told a story in the Bible where the Egyptian women would lie about the baby boys so that Pharaoh wouldn't kill them. And so God blessed them for their lies because it was in the service of saving babies. So it got me thinking, maybe there is some nuance to this. Like, obviously, I'm the type of person that if I say something to you guys, I mean it. I wouldn't ever say, oh, you're wonderful when you're not. If I said, oh, I'm loving this live stream so much when I secretly didn't, I would never say that. But I would have to think if I would have the courage to be able to tell a lie for a good reason. Again, it was a recent occurrence because I had completely forgotten about that passage. But it does get me thinking about, like, has the truth that I told ever hurt people? Has it ever cost a life because of the truth that I've told? It's definitely something I'm going to have to ponder about going forward. You also feel like you can sniff out lies because when people lie to you, your heart starts to beat fast and you know something is wrong. I don't know if I have that ability. That's a cool ability to have, honestly. Because I have a tendency to believe that anyone who's like abstract is like more prone to lying. Or no, I shouldn't say. No, yes, I should say that. Because they don't speak with concrete terms. And so sometimes you lose the entire meaning of their statement. If you guys can believe this, I was so messed up one time that I had trouble believing that my friends were actually girls because I thought they were all lying to me. Like they were all secretly guys that took estrogen. And so it took a lot of time and a lot of healing for me to realize if I say to my friends that I trust them, I need to also be willing to accept that their statements are always going to be absolute. When someone doesn't speak in concrete terms, you prod and prod until they get down to the specifics. Same here. In fact, I do that so much that I often do literal thinking jokes where I'll say to people, like if someone says, "Oh, I'm all wiped out," I'll be like, "Well, I hope the wipe wasn't too wet. You got to save that for the diapers." Stuff like that. I am always that guy that thinks in literal terms before I think in abstract ones. Like someone the other day said, "This is so peak," on one of my videos. And the first thing that popped into my mind, which I ended up writing down, was I said, "I'm pretty sure this was filmed in a basement, not on a mountain." Because, peak of a mountain. I probably should have said, "We're not playing peekaboo." They think you're way too square? Well, I hope you're not triangle. I'm guessing what you mean by square means straightforward. Honestly, as I've gotten older, I've started to realize that I need to, yeah, too literal, of course. I've started to realize that I need to not be so empathetic to people's thoughts. Because, hey, girl, you and I talk about Myers Briggs quite a lot. And we both know that TJ types are more empathetic to people's thoughts than their feelings. And if someone presents a good logical deduction, it's pretty easy for me to be swayed into that way of thinking. I typically don't question like sources that I read, or like if a person says, "Let me explain that this is true," I'm typically going to just say, "Okay," and then question it later. And I've had to learn, like, you know what? Sometimes you just got to challenge other people's logic. Typically, the only time I will ever not trust someone's logic and like not just take it at face value is if it comes across as though it's from them and not an objective observation. Like if someone says, "This is what I think the Bible means," I'll be like, "Not good enough. I want to know, what does the Greek say? What was authorial intent? What are more objective factors here?" So that's why I'm not an FJ. I don't value introverted thinking. If anything, I kind of hate introverted thinking. But I feel like if people know how to use it, it can help them explain their reasoning. It just often seems like people start with the reasoning and then they leave out the explanation. And that's why I tend to have a very hard time getting along with FJ and TP types. Because I'm just like, stop making up logic. Just give me the facts. No, I would agree. Hey, girl. Literal does not mean dumb. In fact, a lot of my friends say that I'm very smart, even though uh, I wouldn't say I'm that smart by objective standards. I just think I'm smart in other ways. Theology degree is a PhD due to so many. What's a PhD? Because I didn't go to college, so I don't really know what most of that means. Um, I went to I went to school for a little bit, but then I got kicked out of school because I was too smart for the curriculum, and then I was homeschooled from then on out, and I loved it. I feel like homeschooling was probably the best decision my parents ever made for me. Professor degree? Oh, okay. Still not 100% sure what that means, but if professors are anything like what they do in Harry Potter, then that makes sense. Uh, Trying to remember. When I took certification classes, did I have professors? I think I just had experts. Well, my water's almost out, so I'm probably going to wrap it up pretty soon. This is definitely one of my longest live streams ever. Before I go, just want to make sure that if anyone has any last lingering questions or things you want to ask, like get them out before my water runs out. Oh, yeah, thank you for coming, hey girl. I do hope that you enjoy the replay, catching up to what you missed. And I hope that we can continue having these discussions because I do like hearing your stories and I hope you enjoy hearing mine. I think everyone else has disappeared. So while I'm waiting, let's make sure I thank everyone that came in. So thank you, Hey Girl. Thank you, Jevil. Thank you, Jungle Runnin'. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Array. Thank you, Lodo DQ3. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. Pretty sure there's only one more person that came in besides that. Let me double check. No, I think that's it. If I'm missing anyone, I apologize. Yeah, I think that'd be really good if you mention that to him the next time he shows up. All right. Well, thank you all so much for watching. I had a blast. Hope you guys did too. Let me know in the comment section if there's anything you want me to talk about in the next live stream. Hope you guys enjoy the replay. And thank you again to all of you for such a wonderful live stream. So until the next time, remember to keep the faith, stay epic, and God bless. Bye.